Can you visualize 50 billion gallons of liquid? Well, that's how much beer is consumed globally on an annual basis. That's about 200 million kiloliters of beer consumed all over the world. Of course, the Czechs, the Austrians, the Germans, they consume almost twice as much beer on a per capita basis than the Americans. But this beer is enjoyed all over the world. So let's take a look at unraveling the supply chain of beer. Beer has been consumed for hundreds of years. And the interesting thing is some of the earliest governing laws around food safety and supply chain transparency came from beer, with the German Beer Purity Law back in 1516. These guidelines are still followed to this day by microbreweries all around the world. Beer supply chains are complex. Freshness makes a big difference. You also want your beer at the right temperature, typically a chilled glass of beer, of course, unless you're in the UK. If you consider one of the largest global beer companies in the world, Anheuser-Busch InBev, they manage over 500 beer brands in over 150 different countries. So it's a big, complex supply chain that's trying to service consumers who want their beer at the right time, at the right place, at the right temperature. So let's outline the end-to-end supply chains of beer. It starts with the ingredients. The three most dominant ingredients are water, barley, and hops. Of course, you're also dealing with glass bottles and cans and packaging materials. These get brought into the breweries, and brewery operations are extremely important. Starts with an overall plan on what are you going to produce, what product mix do you want to produce in that brewery over what time frame, in a time-phased approach way, with the limited and finite capacity you have for production lines in those breweries. Once the beer gets produced through these breweries, it goes into the distribution channels. And typically there, you're dealing with wholesalers. Different countries, different states have different regulations that govern liquor laws. Here in the US, for example, most manufacturers of beer have to work with licensed wholesalers who then in turn fulfill demand with retailers, restaurants, and other channels. Logistics costs are a big driver of the total cost of goods sold. The overall efficiency is important from a cycle time perspective because freshness is important. And again, there's a lot of specialized requirements around packaging and fulfillment and movement of transportation assets using refrigerated equipment, for example. This entire synchronization and orchestration of the supply chain needs to happen like clockwork. There are many different factors that impact the demand for beer, and as we've been studying that through our modeling efforts as part of Llamanomics here at Llamasoft, we found that there are many different positive and negative factors that are impacting demand. For example, the three most dominant positive factors tend to be consumer preference, just preference of beer over other alcoholic beverages. Second is the growth and the surge in female consumers for beer. And third, the growth in youth population in many parts of the world. Among the negative factors, the three most dominant ones tend to be taxes that are levied on beer and the awareness of health impacts of beer. And thirdly, the impact of constrained supply of aluminum that goes into beer cans. The supply chains of beer are so legendary that it led Jay Forrester at MIT several years ago to create the concept of the supply chain beer game. The supply chain beer game has been studied for many years and highlights the bullwhip effect that is inherent in many supply chains in many industries. It highlights how small distortions in downstream orders or demand patterns can result in big swings and volatility upstream. And this beer game, while we've studied for many years, we've more recently collaborated with researchers at the Lehigh University, where we've used an AI agent to compete with you. So I'd encourage you all to participate in this game online. It'll help you understand the power of how AI-based decision-making can help you dampen the concept of the bullwhip that is inherent in your supply chain. The last thing I'd like to say is enjoy your beer, but please drink responsibly.